Welcome, everyone, to the Censinet Champion webinar featuring Northwell Health. I'm Ed Gaudette, CEO and founder of Censinet. Censinet's a leading platform for cyber GRC focused on enterprise and third-party risk management. And today we're going to hear from Ted Rambert from Northwell Health. Ted, before we begin, please take a few moments to introduce yourself and your organization and your role.
Great. Thanks, Ed. Thanks for the introduction. I'm a lead information security specialist at Northwell Health. Northwell Health is New York's largest healthcare provider. We perform security assessments, and I've been at Northwell for the past 7 years. I'm also a primary Censinet administrator, and I'm responsible for the day-to-day Censinet platform administration. We've been working closely with Censinet, and we just came up on our 1-year anniversary. So happy to be here and talk about Censinet.
Excellent. Let's look at the agenda. We have a packed agenda. So maybe you can set up the situation with third-party risk before, obviously, you brought Censinet in.
Yeah, definitely. So third-party risk management for Censinet was a very manual, time-consuming process. As many of our peers know, we had spreadsheets and emails. So we would send out a information security questionnaire, and that really slowed down our process. All right. So, before Censinet, our process was very manual, people intensive and complex. It was, there's a lot of administrative work instead of security work. So we had spreadsheets that would send out over email, and that really slowed down the process. We did not know when a vendor was working on the questionnaire. We didn't know if it went to the right vendor contact. And, it was also time consuming to keep the questionnaires current. Oftentimes, it was easier to simply replace a question than to put another question in our Excel questionnaire, and also to keep it, consistent and have the right wording throughout. Just so everyone knows, the background is, we had a questionnaire on multiple tabs that covered different security domains. And, if it was a SaaS solution, they would get the service provider and organization questions. And these were just point-in-time assessments, and they were sent over email to our vendor contact.
I imagine that must have frustrated your stakeholders that were requesting those assessments. And can you talk about that and obviously the impact that had on your team?
Sure, definitely. So for our stakeholders, our business owners and project managers, they really spent a lot of time having our vendors complete these questionnaires, checking them down, managing follow-ups. It was a lot for them. It was a lot of their time. And we really had limited visibility into what was going on, how far the vendor was getting along in the questionnaire. And, just managing this whole program using Excel is very tedious, right? So a lot of things were, missing and kind of broken across that process. Oftentimes a vendor would say, hey, I'm done with the questionnaire. And we would find 1 or 2 answers that weren't answered. So we'd have to go back and follow up with them on those 2 in addition to our follow-ups. So that was the one thing that was really inefficient. Another thing was figuring out what are the risks, right? So we have a very manual process with Excel. And while we had, highlighted cells, we would have to rephrase each question as an action item and have the vendor respond to that. So the vendor thought they were done, and we had around 10 to 20 follow-ups per each review. So we would have to have a meeting to go through that and chase those. Oftentimes, too, a vendor would provide a quarter date. Was that a fiscal date or calendar date? So we needed actual calendar days. So can we, we would say, hey, can we put 12/31/2024, as a commitment date?
Yeah, turning that unstructured data into structured data. I'm sure helps the team with efficiencies. And you'd mentioned when we spoke earlier about curation. Can you talk about the curation effort that you also had to employ?
Yeah, definitely. So for curation, we would have regular meetings to go over any feedback we got, any ambiguities that vendors brought up. And, we really needed to modernize our question set. And we did that around 2021. But we really want to make sure that it was aligned with standards, and it was a lot of time. So oftentimes we would do the question curation. We would have a lot of changes proposed, and then one specialist on the team would work on that. We would pick up his workload, and then, he would release that questionnaire. We would test it, make sure there are no breaking changes. We built a whole application out of Excel, as you can imagine, with the radio buttons and risk scoring. And it was a lot for curation. And whenever there was a threat like WannaCry, or Lockbit, or any sort of other concerns out there, we added questions on security controls. Like I said before, it was often easier just to replace a question than to add another cell, add this, test all the changes. And just to put it in perspective in terms of curation, our last process, we did a major overhaul. It actually took 2 months just to, 2 months of meetings to review each question, make sure it was aligned to a standard, make sure it was rephrased correctly, and have to go through various approvals. So very time consuming for question curation. We really wanted to make sure we were thorough, but we knew we were hitting the upper limit in terms of number of questions too. So we really had to think hard about which questions we were asking and where our focus was.
Yeah, great points. And obviously maintaining that longer term is always a challenge, especially at the rate everything changes in healthcare and in cybersecurity.
Yeah, definitely. We spent a lot of time updating those questionnaires. And one of the things too is that often a business owner or a vendor would fill an old questionnaire, old version, and we have to follow up, and we'd have to make sure that those critical controls were answered. So added to our list of follow-ups and managing and remembering, which questions did we add on this version? And we'd only release a new version every year or so. And even then, there were still some issues with, old questionnaires being sent out. In fact, when we implemented Censinet, we had to have a big communication about not using Excel anymore. That was one of the major selling points for our stakeholders. They were very relieved. And, that's really where we, it's just really complicated our workflow, having those old questionnaires out there.
Yeah. Let's look at the process around evaluation selection and that process that you undertook to obviously understand your requirements, and then also bring in a vendor like Censinet and ensure that we obviously we're going to meet your requirements and would help you solve a lot of the problems you brought up earlier.
Right. So when we approached this problem, we evaluated several different options that were out there. And we needed a few things. We saw that many platforms were not healthcare focused. One of the things that a lot of our colleagues are familiar with is the MDS squared for medical devices. A lot of these platforms did not have a way to easily ingest that. And medical device vendors spend a lot of time, especially with the 2019 version, which has hundreds of questions, over 300 questions, which is really good information. So the idea of filling it out once and using it everywhere really resonated with us. And, the MDS2 or MDS squared import, that was really an important thing. We knew that was going to be a barrier to adoption for any other product.
Yeah.
And we wanted a platform that was really quick to onboard, and did not require significant customization. We wanted to be out of the question curation business. So one of the things that we love about Censinet is the curation team, really is responsive to our needs and our questions and our asks, and we have good discussions with them. Another thing too, with the automation of action plans and our workflow, we needed a workflow tool to manage this. And that was one of the big things. We wanted a dashboard. We wanted a dashboard where we can view, the status of each assessment. With the old process, our management had to go to each individual specialist to say, hey, what's outstanding? How can I move this forward? How can I help you? Now we know, hey, the action plan has been with the vendor for 2 weeks. Let's move this forward. So we really wanted, a collaborative platform as well, where we work with vendors to remediate items. We wanted to eliminate email as much as possible. That was the end goal. And, finally, with the complete once and share everywhere philosophy with the MDS squared, we always wondered, is there something for applications and vendor risk management? And so that shared network of repositories of completed questionnaires was something that we really wanted to do, because our regulations aren't different from other healthcare systems. And, we can definitely utilize what other healthcare systems are doing.
I remember you telling me that you were able to reimagine how you actually could do what was possible, and sort of, what a future state could look like using a tool like Censinet.
So we went through a reimagination process. We had a very legacy process with around 4 teams involved. We wanted to have a very quick and efficient process and really giving everyone a better experience, our vendors, especially our business stakeholders, and us as assessors, our team. With more automation, a lot of the manual tasks were simply gone. A lot of checking other teams on statuses, really empowered us to be more involved in the process and, really lead the assessment process. We focused it all around Censinet strengths, which is on the screen, right? Why Censinet? And that ultimately provided like the internal buy-in for the teams to select Censinet, all those good features.
Yeah, and I think some of the points we talked about earlier was this ability to focus on the tasks around risk management and remediation versus administration and documentation activities. So moving from activity to action, I think was really important for you.
No, it definitely was. And one of the things that really helped was the positive references that we had from some of your other customers. The very quick onboarding process and not having to customize the solution endlessly to meet our needs. And the corrective action plans, they're preset already in there. We just have to adjust it to our risk tolerance.
You also, you talked about the onboarding process. Can you give, listeners a sense of how long it took you? And did you have experience maybe with other tools or other processes? And, I'd love to compare and contrast those experiences.
Sure, definitely. So it only took a few weeks for us to get fully onboarded. We had besides some preparation work, like setting up single sign-on and project plan, we only had a 3-week soft launch where we started putting reviews into the system, determining where we needed to adjust our process. And, Censinet was right there with us. We had a 3-day in-person training session. And right after, we made the decision to go forward, use Censinet as it is, and, really improve, our process. And then we started officially communicating 3 weeks out to the rest of the organization, saying, hey, please stop using the questionnaires. We'll reach out to you and we'll invite them under to Censinet. So we gave them some background on that, and we really communicated that change so that they all knew what was coming and, what to expect from this. So it really allowed us to reduce the complexity with assessments and also improve, and provide visibility into when vendors are participating, how often they are logging into completing, how much they're progressing through the questionnaire. And
let's look at let's talk about the overall impact that you had on your program. And love to explore efficiencies. Were you able to redeploy, if you will, or have folks on the team maybe focus on more downstream activities versus some of the administrative tasks you said earlier that pre-existed the Censinet deployment? And then what impact did it have for other folks that were involved in the process? Did it help out your contracting process, for example? Were you able to streamline some of the barriers or challenges you may have faced there?
So for changes for us, we're actually focusing more on critical information security controls. So think single sign-on, multi-factor, and actually verifying that they're implemented for each one. Before, we simply didn't have the bandwidth. Now, personally, I spend 50% less time on assessments. I'm more involved with implementation and more governance for those critical controls. And, that's really streamlining, our processes. And we've been able to refocus other teams instead of having them involved in the review process. They provide the guidelines, and then we carry out those guidelines. So they're more involved in the implementation process more than the assessment process.
Oh, great. Okay, cool. And those other folks are able to do more, like you said, remediation activity and education as well, and things of that nature, or?
So they're able to do more of implementation, guidance, and governance overall. So they're able to help with downstream processes versus being burdened by reviewing questionnaires, reviewing SharePoint requests, and they're able to be, reassigned to things that are a lot more valuable.
Excellent. And you had mentioned this notion of life cycle risk and being able to not just only have a system of record, but have a system of intelligence that enables you to track when changes are made by the vendor, or if there's a configuration adjustment, or maybe the usage scope changes. You're able to capture that all in the system. What has that meant for you and your team?
Sure. So kind of talk about our previous process. We had a Word summary document that we sent via email, and, having management review that questionnaire and review those vendors' responses, that took a while, and oftentimes there were follow-ups. So having it really in one view and, being able to click to another tab to see the action plan and see what the vendor agreed upon, that's really saved us a lot of time, and it's really all in one place. I believe I talked about a disparate process before. So if a vendor said we don't have this control, but then on a call they said they would do it in 3 months, we have to update in 3 different places, and then list that as a commitment. In Censinet, that's just all in one place, and that's what's really helped us from a workflow perspective.
Excellent. And have you been able to use some of the extra features like reassessments? Have you begun to schedule reassessments for vendors and products as well?
So we're coming up on our 1-year anniversary, so we'll be kicking off our first reassessment pretty soon.
Excellent.
We're looking forward to doing that to see, which findings were remediated, which findings are existing findings, and see if we, can kind of kick that off. So, yeah.
And did you use the tiering capability of that to sort of, set your tiers and then have that drive the automation for reassessments?
We did. So, it's based on business criticality, and if it's a lower tier, it's more frequent, and we're able to really focus on that. Before, with the sheer amount of assessments and requests, we could only do it every couple of years, and now we can really focus on our critical vendors, and we can reassess them and make sure that nothing has changed. And that's really something we're looking forward to. And I think that's really important to do because things do change. Companies get acquired. The business case changes for different applications, and it could be deployed enterprise-wide instead of via department. So it's really important to keep tabs on our critical vendors and critical products and services that support us.
Yeah, those are excellent points. And you mentioned the power of purpose-built for healthcare earlier. And we often find that folks that are running the TPRM program initially are, a little bit afraid of change because they realize that they've got their process, and even though it's got some challenges, bringing in a new tool does require you to look at your process and adjust accordingly. Now, again, if you have a great process and a bad tool, you're going to get bad results, and vice versa. If you have a great tool and a bad process, you'll get bad results. So you really need the two things to harmonize and influence and inform each other. What do you say to those folks? And did you have that? And did anyone in your team have sort of that anxiety, if you will, around change? And how did you drive that internal transformation? So oftentimes when we work with organizations that are just beginning to evaluate us or a tool like ours, right, there tends to be downstream resistance because the assessors, are maybe afraid of change or have anxiety around change. And so, change is a big deal and you have to manage that accordingly. How what advice do you have to them that, for those assessors and the people that are responsible for the third-party risk management program, as it relates to that, to that fear of change or that anxiety around change?
So in terms of change, the big change is that we're less focused on administrative work. We're security professionals. We want to focus on critical controls and actual security work, identification of risks, and remediation. So we did have a legacy process where there was a lot of manual work. And I think we all welcomed the change. We wanted to focus on vendors that don't have single sign-on or multi-factor authentication. We want to focus on really where the risk is, what moves the risk needle. And so we took that and we said, yes, this is not a perfect process, right? Our old process wasn't perfect either. There were a lot of legacy concerns and issues with turnaround time. And, we've really been able to, reduce that turnaround time. And if we have a really responsive vendor, it will only take a week or so for us to complete an assessment. And that really frees up more time for us to analyze risk and really not focus on sending emails, sending, Word documents, things of that nature.
Yeah, and I really liked your process that you set up. You had sort of a process owner, and then you also have someone that was the Uber manager of the process too. And how did that help you with your transition and your transformation?
Yep. So as I mentioned, we went through a process reimagination. We all 15 or so of us were in a conference room for 3 days, and it was hard to keep everyone on task and focus because there were a lot of things that everyone wanted to discuss. So having that process owner, be the referee and say, yes, we know this is a problem, but we have to work through this, or this is something that belongs in Censinet versus something that belongs outside of Censinet. Yeah, it was good to reimagine our process and understand that change is good, that we needed change. And we wanted that change. We wanted the change of having an automated workflow and for this to be a lot easier on us as well as, our business stakeholders.
Excellent. Well, Ted, this has been terrific. I really appreciate your time. Is there any last minute comments or anything else you'd like to say?
No, I would say that, don't be afraid of change. In terms of last remarks, I think it's good that we're working with Censinet on feature requests and question curation. We've been able to reduce our custom questions to practically, only a handful. And we're really thankful for that. We just wanted to, say thank you and keep up the good work with the platform and, just looking forward to great things from Censinet.
Thank you for your support, Ted. Appreciate everything you've done and appreciate you sharing your journey and your story with our listeners.
No, thank you so much, Ed.